Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome to Funtastic Science. My name is Barb. Today we're going to talk to Tennille, who's a scientist at NOAA, and she's going to tell us about what it's like to live at a very cold and faraway place, okay? So let's get started. Here's Tennille.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for calling in today so I could talk to you a little bit. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it was like to live at the North Pole in the middle of the winter, because I just came back from there after being up there for 4 months. First, we have to talk a little bit about where the North Pole is, though I think that some of you have been watching, I heard some of you have been watching Nova Film, so you might know already. And if you have a globe at home, you can have your parents show you as well. But here's our planet, and here's the continent that we live on. We're all about right here. And people think of the North Pole as you go up, 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 and it's like right at the very tippy top of the planet. And there's my little North Pole sticker sign to show you about where on the planet it is. If we kind of fly up to the top of the planet and look down at the North Pole, it looks like this. And in the winter time, there is lots and lots of snow over all the places where there's land. You can see these places where there's land and there's snow. Here's Alaska. We're down in here. And the North Pole is actually covered by an ocean that we call the Arctic Ocean. And in the winter time, especially, it is covered with ice from shore to shore. And this is where we went to live, is to actually live on the ice in the middle of the ocean. And I have got a little sticker here again for the North Pole. We think of as being right here. One question, of course, somebody should ask is, how do I get to this place that's so far away and that's in the middle of the ocean and that's covered with ice? And the answer to that is you have to take a special kind of ship that's called an icebreaker. And an icebreaker does exactly what you would think it does. It breaks ice. It not only floats on the water like a regular ship, it also, when it gets to ice, it can actually start breaking through the ice so that it can continue going. And it has to be very specially designed, and it has to be very powerful to be able to do this. So when we were traveling up last November, and so that was about 4 months ago. And what you see here at the bottom is the front of the ship. And I'm standing up at the very top of the ship in the place called the bridge where they steer the ship. And the first thing that we started to see is pancake ice. And you can see why it's called pancake ice, because it looks just like pancakes floating all over the ocean. And these lights you see are the searchlights from the ship, and they're looking forward because now it has solid things that it's going to have to be sailing through. And so it wants to be able to look very carefully and pick a best path. And after a while, we kept going and going farther and farther north. It got colder and colder and darker, and the ice got solider and solider. And after a while, you couldn't tell anymore that there was ice floating on top of an ocean. It looked just like a regular land surface with snow on top. After a little while, we found the place where we could actually stop and get out at the ship that we were going to live on. And we could actually get out and we could walk around and we could start putting our instruments up and we could start living. And one thing to keep in mind is that all the ice and snow that we had around, there was coming from the atmosphere. And here's like a microscopic picture of the different kinds of snowflakes that were falling down. So to let you know that we had ice all over the place, not just ice freezing on the ocean, but ice from snow and ice coming from clouds. I see a question, how cold was it? And I would say the coldest temperature I had was minus 45 degrees. So because it's so cold, we had to dress very, very carefully, and we had to keep our face and every bit of our skin covered all the time. And people like to have these kind of fur ruffs around their face because you could kind of create a little warm place inside your hat like this. And I know a lot of people are wearing masks right now so they don't get sick and they don't get other people sick, but we were wearing them just to keep our skin protected. Besides being cold, it was very, very windy. And in this picture, you can, I think, actually see the wind, and it's blowing past. This is one of the little houses that we built out on the ice to put some of our instruments inside. These are electrical cables. And so this is where we kind of built a little village out in the middle of the ice. I see a question about polar bears, and the answer is yes, I did see a polar bear, and when we get to it, then I will show you pictures of that in a little bit. It was also very, very dark at the North Pole, and when you go north on our planet in the middle of the winter time, the sun does not come up at all. And so for 4 months, I did not see the sun come up once. Windy, how windy did it get? It got pretty windy in Boulder. You know how windy it gets, and I would say it didn't get quite that windy, but it got so that it was blowing things over, and it got so it was blowing so much snow that we would have to stay inside and not go out because you couldn't see anything. Now I've got a little tiny video here that's really short, and it'll show you a little bit about what the ice looked like and how windy and cold and dark it was. And you can kind of see there was all different kinds of ice, and sometimes it was broken and sometimes it was solid. So what you should be wondering about is, where did I live when I went to this cold, cold, dark, far away place that nobody goes? And Kay, I see a question about life. And again, I'll show you some pictures of all the different kinds of live things that we saw. So this was our house while we lived out at the North Pole, or close to the North Pole. And here are these lines here. And what we did is we took this boat and we let the ice freeze all the way around it. And then we actually attached it to the ice with these lines. And you can see people right here. And then right here was this little gangplank that we had that we would go up onto the ship. And then all these windows are cabins where people lived. And then up here is where they could drive the boat from. This is called the bridge. And it's all covered with all different kinds of things to measure things. Okay, this is another little map of the North Pole. And one thing to know is, after we froze our ship into the ice, it actually kept moving because the ice was moving. And even though it didn't feel like it, we would be moving, drifting along with the ice. And this is sort of the pathway when they drove. You can see it's really smooth when they drove the ship into the ice. And then they parked it. And then we drifted this entire way. And so I think we drifted something like 300 miles while I was on the ship. And I keep saying that I was at the North Pole. The North Pole is actually right here. And we got really close to the North Pole. And we were really excited. North Pole is called at 90 degrees. And we got to 88.36 north on February 24th. And we had people tell us that that's the furthest north that a ship has been in the Arctic winter in all of history. So how did I get around? People could walk on the ice, and people could take snowmobiles around on the ice, but the instruments that I was in charge of, some of them were very far away from the ship. And so I had this great thing where I got to take a helicopter to work a lot of times. And here's a little video I have of what it was like to ride in the helicopter. It looks like you're in a car right now, but you're not. Wait for it. So why would we do this? And it's all about taking measurements. That's what scientists like to do. We like to take measurements. Probably a lot of you have a thermometer. You recognize this. This is for taking temperature. Probably a lot of you have this in your house, which is a ruler for measuring how big things they are. And all of you, I know, are learning how to count now, 1, 2, 3. And really what we were doing as scientists out there is we were taking temperatures, we were measuring things, how big they were, and we were counting things. This is a tower we had, and it looks really fancy. There's somebody here climbing it right now to look at some of the instruments and to clean some of the snow off. And you can see instruments here at this level, and this level. And it looks really complicated, but I'll tell you what we were doing is we were measuring temperatures at all these different places. So just like you measure your temperature to see what your health is like, we're measuring temperature of the environment to see what the health of the environment is like. Another thing we would do besides measuring temperatures, like I told you, is measuring how thick things were. Here's a picture of people standing on this big, thick piece of ice, and they have this coring system that they're going down. And really, they literally would take a ruler, just like the one in your house, to see how thick the ice was. And the ice sometimes was maybe as thick as a ruler, 12 inches or 1 foot. But look down at the floor of the room you're in and look up at the ceiling, and that's probably about 8 or 9 feet. And sometimes the ice was that thick. Sometimes this ice could be that thick where we were. And we did lots of counting. People took nets and they dropped them through holes in the ice way down to the bottom of the ocean. And the bottom of the ocean was more than a mile deep. And then with the nets, they would bring them up and through that cold, dark ocean from deep, 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 deep. And they would gather. And what you're seeing here is these little tiny animals called copepods here. And then the biology scientists would actually count them. So you can kind of make a guess how many of these things that you think are in this jar here, and that people would actually count every single one of them. And this is the instrument that I was in charge of. And we were measuring several different things with this thing. We were measuring temperatures. We would take rulers just like this one, and we would measure how deep the snow was underneath our instruments. And on this particular day, there were so many stars, it was hard not to try to start counting the stars. Now, this is what all you guys have been waiting for. I wanted to talk to you about all the creatures that were living out there, because you would think with all this ice and all this dark and all this snow and so far away from any plants that how could anything possibly live there? But there were actually lots of animals. And here, I think all of you have spotted a little fox here. And this is somebody taking his picture. So there's my fox picture. And he was very, very cute, but he was actually a very evil little fox, not evil, but he was a very mischievous little fox because he went and chewed lots and lots of our cables into little pieces and so disturbed our measurements. So we spent a lot of time trying to chase him off and convincing him to move along his way so that he stopped eating up all our cables. And I told you they sent nets way deep down into the ocean, and they were bringing up these strange, strange looking fish. And they were bringing up these little tiny jellyfish. And I've got this little tiny, this thing, and I'm not a biologist, so I actually don't even know what this is. I think it's some kind of jellyfish, but I've got a little movie here that you can see because these things would come up alive, and we'd put them in little dishes with water, and the biologists would count them, and they would classify them, and they would take pictures of them so that they could see what kind of animals were living down in the Arctic Ocean in the dark, under the ice in that cold, cold water. I heard somebody, when you got on, you said that you watched a NOVA about an ROV, so you know what that is. And an ROV is a remotely operated vehicle. And this is the one we have. And this tent is sitting out on the ice. And they cut a hole in the ice, and then they kept heat in here so the ice didn't just freeze up. And they had this remotely operated vehicle here with a claw on the end that they could send down through the hole in the ice into the ocean, and then it could swim around and look at things. And I've got a little video here. You're going to have to watch carefully, but this is a day when the ROV saw a seal swimming around underneath the ice. And there's little fish as well. So watch for the seal. Those are little fish. There's the seal right there. There are some instruments we have hanging down underneath the ice that are measuring things like temperature about the ocean water. There's a little fish that's gone into a little cave. There's the seal. There's the seal. And there he goes, looking like a fat fish swimming away from the ROV. And he wasn't very afraid. He came peeking out to see what the ROV was doing. Somebody asked about polar bears. Here's a picture of a polar bear that came to our camp in the middle of the night. And it was dark all the time, but this was nighttime. Everybody was asleep, so we never actually saw it. And he came, and he was very interested in all our instruments. It was like he was on a science field trip, and he moved some things around. And here's another picture of a polar bear that came to visit. They're very, very curious. They're not afraid of people. And actually, we're a little bit afraid of them because they're very, very big animals. So we stay away from them, and we wait for them to go away, or we try to chase them away so that they won't be around people. Here's a picture of a mother and a baby polar bear. And this is the polar bear that I saw the best. And this is when we were on our way home. And so it was starting to get light. And you can see all the scientists went rushing to the side of the boat to look at this polar bear here. And because he came so close, we were able to see some incredible pictures. I did not see Santa Claus. I saw a question in the chat box. But I will tell you that we had a logbook for reporting about why people were going out on the ice, and you had to say when you were going to go out and why you were going to be out and what you were going to be doing and when you were going to come back. And when I looked at our logbook on Christmas Eve, there was an entry from Santa saying that he was going to take a sledge and 2 of the snowmobiles, and he was going to be out delivering packages. So I know he was there, but I didn't actually see him. So here's this polar bear again, and the reason that he's dropping his tongue out is it helps him to smell. I don't think he was coming to the ship just because he wanted to say hi. I suspect he was coming to the ship because he wanted to see if there was any food he could get. So he was smelling with his nose and his tongue. And here's one more polar bear picture. They have got lots of fur on their feet so that they can stay up on the snow and they can keep their feet warm. And this was a super healthy male polar bear. And you can see these little things over his eyes are scars because he's been in fights with other polar bears. So these are all the people that I was out there with. We were standing on the hard ice, and here's the ship. We're in front of the ship. And people got pretty goofy because we were out there for a long time. And this was somebody who dressed up like a pineapple. And here's somebody who dressed up like a tiger. And this is actually me right here. And it was really great working with these people for all this time, and I really miss them now. And here's a little picture of who I am. I know you guys could see me on the camera, and I think you could see me right now on the camera, but this is me when I'm out working. And here I'm dressed so that I can go flying in the helicopter. And here I'm wearing all my warm clothes. And here's a picture of me with my instruments. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is, of course, I was having this amazing experience and seeing all these things for the first time. And so one thing that I did is I drew this sort of picture of all the different things that I saw while I was out there for 4 months. And here's the fox, where I said bad fox, because he had been chewing on our cables. Here's the polar bear that came by. Here's the ship that I lived on. Here's people outside working. Here is the ROV system that I showed you. Here's the seal. Here's all the little creatures down in the ocean. We had this balloon that we flew up into the air that we called Miss Piggy. And I think you guys could do this with your own house. You could take your life and you could draw little pictures of it and make a sort of a collage of everything that you've got going on. And then it would be because right now we're kind of all living on ships. You're living someplace where you have everything you need. You can go outside, but you can't really go someplace. And so I think it's really interesting and that you can do this too. And you can also take a ruler and start measuring stuff in your house, and you can be scientists too. You don't have to go to the North Pole to do this. So I would encourage everybody, if you're interested in science, start measuring things, start drawing pictures of things. And with that, I'm going to stop talking, and then I'm going to see if people have any more questions or if I missed any of the questions while we were going along.
Hey, Tennille, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, well, there were a couple questions that I think may not have gotten answered yet. Someone asked if they could come with you next time.
Do you know what? This was sort of this is a project that was planned for once, and I think they've been planning it for 10 years, and I don't think there's going to be a next time for a long time. But I think that you should definitely, if you think that this looks wonderful, you should start planning on doing this someday. And like I said, start off by being a scientist and going observing things about your environment. Go outside and look and see what's in your garden. Go see what spiders you can find in your house. And then you can be working towards being able to go on projects like this too. I see a question here. Did it really get to 9.5 degrees centigrade up at 88 degrees north? And the answer is no. I think that the warmest it got when I was there was minus 9.5 degrees C.
Somebody also asked if you measured the water up there.
We did, and this this picture that I have, I hope you guys can still see it. There was this, they have these things called CTDs, which they drop down into the ocean on these long cables, and they drop them all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, and they measure things like the temperature and how much salt is the water. And they also open up these bottles and collect water from deep down in the ocean. And they also have nets to collect the creatures that are living in the ocean.
Okay, did anybody else have a question for Tennille today?
I wish I could have spent more time seeing everybody, It was really fun. And for those of you that logged in at the beginning, I could see your cameras. That was really great. And thanks very much for listening to me. And your parent can definitely give you my email address. And if you want to, you are welcome to send me any more questions. And I can send you some pictures and things if you like.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you again for another Funtastic Science presentation.
Thank you, everybody. It was great to see you.
Thank you, Tennille. Bye.
Bye.
Ship sunk.
Bye, Tennille. Thanks.
There's an Arctic ghost ship.
Thank you.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an Arctic ghost ship who sunk in the Arctic.
You know what? There are a lot of ghosts in the Arctic. There's a history of people trying to do these explorations in the Arctic. And when they did it in the old days with wooden ships and without electricity and with dogs, they had a lot of problems. And so I actually agree with you. I think that there are definitely ghost ships in the Arctic.
There's an Arctic ghost ship sunk there too. It was made of wood.
Yes.
That one was also there.
Do you know the name of the ship?
You don't remember? I don't remember either.
It's the Arctic ghost ship.
Yeah.
That's the name.
There are museums up in the Arctic where they have some things from these ships that broke up and then they drifted in the ice and they finally got to land and people found them and they put them in museums. It's really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.